My name is Miriam. I'm 47 years old, and the last thing I expected that Monday morning was to be told I didn't matter. Flights are $1,500 each, my father said, without blinking. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. His voice was cold, just like it had always been. The news had come suddenly. My brother Jonathan was getting married, in a vineyard, overseas, with only immediate family invited. And my father, well, he was flying the whole clan out, except me, because I wasn't immediate enough. I stood there holding the phone, feeling my knees tremble slightly. My hands were damp. I had tried to play it cool, asking about the date, what I should pack. But his answer hit me like a slap. Stay behind. He didn't even ask if I was okay. Is this because of the money I borrowed after Mom passed? I asked quietly. There was a long silence. Then he said, Don't make this about the past. But how could I not? The past was everything. It held the moments I raised Jonathan when our mother was too sick. The years I worked double shifts while Dad took business trips with his second wife. The Christmases I spent alone while they were skiing in some mountain resort. It wasn't just about the flight. It was about what it meant. I wasn't invited. I was being excluded. And as I stared at the gray ceiling above my couch that night, tears slipping into my ears, one thought echoed louder than any other. If I don't go, will they even notice I'm gone? I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The smell of cinnamon and burnt sugar wakes me every morning at 5 a.m., reminding me of simpler times when Mom was still alive and the world felt safe. Now it's just me and silence. I work at a retirement home as a caregiver. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most days, I listen more than I speak. Stories from strangers have replaced conversations with my own family. Your hands are gentle, Mrs. Collins told me once, gripping my wrist softly. Were you a mother? I smiled. No, ma'am, just a sister. But the truth is, I was a mother in many ways. After Mom got sick, I was 16 when Dad handed me a set of house keys and said, You're in charge now. He meant it literally. Cooking, cleaning, helping Jonathan with homework. I even skipped college so Dad wouldn't have to hire a nurse. Now Jonathan's a lawyer, drives a black SUV, wears a watch worth more than my yearly rent. We barely talk. He texts once a year, usually around tax season. Come to the wedding, he wrote. Dad says you can't afford it, but maybe there's a loan option? A loan for a seat at my own brother's wedding. Still, part of me wanted to go. Not for the wedding, for the chance to be seen. My neighbor, Elsie, a sharp 72-year-old with fiery red hair, knocked on my door the next night. You going? She asked, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. Not sure I'm wanted, I said. She blew out smoke and looked me straight in the eye. Sometimes you gotta show up anyway, even when they don't clap. I started looking at my finances that same night. My checking account had $342. Savings, empty, credit card, maxed from the last emergency, when my heater broke in the middle of winter. Take a loan, my coworker Lena suggested at lunch the next day, or ask your dad again. Maybe he'll change his mind. But I knew better. My father never changed his mind. He changed wives, jobs, countries, but never his mind. Elsie showed up again that night with a brown envelope. What's this? I asked. My tax refund, she said, pushing it into my hand. Take it. I froze. Number Elsie, I can't. Yes, you can. It's $1,800. Enough for the flight and a cheap hotel. Don't argue with me. I've lived long enough to know when something matters. Tears welled in my eyes. This isn't your fight. You're wrong, she said. Every woman past 40 carries the same wounds. We give, we raise, we forgive, and then they forget us. Still, I hesitated. Was I really going to fly across the ocean to crash a wedding that didn't want me there? I called Jonathan again. He didn't answer. I sent a message, thinking of coming. Would that be okay? He replied 2 hours later. Honestly, might be awkward. Dad's not thrilled, but do what you want. My hands shook reading it. Do what you want. I wanted to scream, to ask him if he remembered how many nights I stayed up with him when he had fevers, if he knew I sold Mom's necklace to buy him his prom suit. But instead, I opened Elsie's envelope. I booked the flight, not because I was welcome, but because I had every right to be there. The flight was in 4 days. I packed in silence, a single dress, modest shoes. I didn't own much that was elegant enough for a wedding, but I wasn't going to impress anyone. I was going to remind them I existed. At work, Lena noticed my nervous hands. "You sure about this?" she asked. I nodded, but the truth was, no, I wasn't. On the second night, just before the trip, a letter slid under my apartment door. No stamp, no return address. It was from my father. "Miriam, I heard from Jonathan that you're coming. I won't stop you, but let's be clear. This wedding isn't the place for family drama. Keep to yourself. We'll speak after." Dad. There was no love, no "see you soon," just a warning. That night, I sat on the floor with the letter in my lap, hands trembling. I didn't cry. I'd already cried too many times over this man. I prayed instead. "God, if you see me, if you remember me, please give me strength not to run from this." I remembered something Mom once said in her final days. Even if your father forgets you, God will not. He carves your name in his hand. I whispered it like a vow. Elsie came to say goodbye the morning I left. She handed me a tiny Bible and a tin of homemade cookies. "Eat something sweet when they go bitter on you," she said with a wink. At the airport, I felt out of place. Women with designer luggage, couples laughing. I clutched my small carry-on and kept my head down. It wasn't just a flight. It was a reckoning, and I was ready. The wedding venue was more beautiful than I imagined. Rows of grapevines rolled across the hills like waves. The chapel was carved from stone, with white flowers wrapped around every beam. Guests were already arriving, all in polished shoes and glossy smiles. I stood near the back, invisible. No one greeted me. Then I saw him, Jonathan, in a tailored blue suit, hair slicked back, laughing with his bride and her family. He didn't see me. I watched for a moment. My chest tightened. Was I really his sister? Or just a name he used to know? I stepped forward. "Miriam?" a voice called. I turned. It was her, Jonathan's bride. Tall, graceful, kind eyes. She approached me, almost in a hush. "I'm Rachel," she said softly. "You're Miriam, his sister." I nodded, unsure of what came next. "He never told me what you did for him growing up," she continued. "I found out last week from Elsie. She called me." I blinked. "She what?" Rachel smiled, eyes glistening. "She told me everything about your mother, about how you kept your family together, and how they erased you." I couldn't breathe. "I asked Jonathan about it," she said. "He broke down. He said he didn't know how to face you." I looked at her, stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because this wedding should begin with truth, not silence." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. "Here, your seat is in the front row, next to me." That's when I saw him, Jonathan, standing at the top of the steps, his eyes locked on mine, and in his face, I saw it. Shame, recognition, and a brother I hadn't seen in 20 years. I walked up the steps slowly. Jonathan didn't move. He just watched me, as if searching for something he'd lost and suddenly found. When I reached him, I whispered, "You look just like Mom when you're nervous." His mouth quivered. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, barely audible. I didn't come for you, I answered. I came for me. His shoulders dropped. He looked down. I was a coward, Miriam. I let Dad decide who belonged. And who didn't, I added. He nodded, ashamed. I'm sorry, he said. I should have fought for you. The chapel bells began to chime. Guests turned toward the doors. But Jonathan stayed still. Do you forgive me? He asked. I took a deep breath. I forgive the boy who needed me. I'm still deciding about the man who forgot me. His eyes filled. He nodded. I'll wait. Rachel appeared at the entrance, motioning for him. He turned, then looked back at me. Your family, Miriam. You always were. I was the one who walked away. As the ceremony began, I sat in the front row, beside Rachel's parents. They welcomed me like I'd always belonged. When the vows started, I couldn't stop the tears. Not because of love in the air, but because after years of absence, my name had been spoken again, with honor. Later at the reception, my father approached. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. He stood beside me, awkward. I see you made it, he said. I did. A long pause. You look like your mother, he added. She wouldn't have missed this, I replied, not looking at him. He nodded, lips pressed tight. She wouldn't have let me either. He walked away, and I stood taller. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The vineyard was quiet, mist curling over the grass. I stepped outside with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, letting the chill bite into my skin. I wasn't the same woman who had boarded that plane. During breakfast, Jonathan found me alone at a garden table. I booked a spa for Rachel and me, he said awkwardly. But I canceled. I thought, maybe you'd want to walk with me instead. I raised an eyebrow. Now you want time with your sister? He smiled, nervous. I want time with the woman who raised me. We walked in silence for a while, through olive trees and dusty paths. He talked about law school, about the promotions, about Dad's endless expectations. Then he stopped and looked at me. I've spent years trying to prove myself to a man who never saw either of us. But you saw me before I even became anyone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I stopped asking to be seen a long time ago, I said. I just wanted peace. He nodded slowly. You have it now? I looked around, the vineyard, the sun rising, my heartbeat steady. I think I do. He reached into his pocket. This is yours, he said, handing me a small box. Inside was a gold necklace with a tiny dove charm. Mom's? I whispered. I bought it back last year. Tracked it down. Didn't know if I'd ever be brave enough to give it to you. I clutched it gently. Thank you, I said. Not just for this. For what then? For remembering. We walked back quietly, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a shadow anymore. The final dinner before my return home was held under lanterns, hung between olive trees, long tables with candles flickering. Laughter floated in the air like music, but I sat quietly, watching more than speaking. Rachel raised her glass. To family, she said, looking directly at me. I smiled politely, unsure how much of that word still applied. Then my father stood. It was rare to see him at the center of attention without commanding it, but this time his voice was softer, unsteady. I've made mistakes, he began, holding his glass low. Many, especially with my children. He paused, then looked at me. Miriam, I was wrong, not just in what I said before this wedding, but in what I failed to say for a lifetime. The table fell silent. I let pride guide me, and pride is a terrible shepherd. His hand trembled as he lifted the glass. You deserved more than silence, more than judgment. My throat tightened. Everyone turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I stood slowly. There's a verse, I said, voice barely above a whisper. It says, The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Gasps rippled through the guests. I was rejected, but I'm still here, and I thank God that I came anyway. The table erupted into applause, but I didn't cry, not yet. After dinner, Jonathan and I walked alone. He wrapped his arm gently around my shoulder. You shook the ground tonight, he whispered. No, I said. I just remembered who I was. He smiled, and I smiled back, because the real celebration was just beginning. On my last morning at the vineyard, I found my father alone in the small chapel. He sat in the front pew, hunched forward, hands clasped like a man in prayer, but he wasn't speaking. He looked up when he saw me. I was hoping you'd come, he said quietly. I stood by the door, unsure if I should sit. I thought you didn't want me here, I answered. I didn't want to see what I had done, he said. That's different. I sat beside him, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. I spent my whole life trying to keep control, he continued. After your mother died, I thought if I just stayed strong, everything else would fall into place. But it didn't, I said. No, he admitted. It fell apart, and I pushed away the one person who was holding it all together. His voice cracked. I don't expect forgiveness, he whispered. Good, I said, surprising myself, because forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you give. He turned to me, eyes red. Then why are you here? I looked at the altar, because I needed to stop carrying this alone, and because deep down, I still hoped you'd remember I was your daughter. He covered his face with his hands. I remember now. I reached over and placed my hand on his. No more pretending. He nodded, breathing deep. I want to make things right. You can start, I said softly, by calling me next Sunday. Not for money, not for guilt, just to talk. He nodded again. I will. We sat in silence, and in that quiet room, I felt something break, and something else begin.